The word of the day is multiplication. I've been thinking a lot about the relationship of the Sermon on the Mount to disciple making. In 12 Church, I do something called a weekly word, which is just a very brief Bible teaching on some aspect of Scripture. Right now I'm picking through the Sermon on the Mount, and even as I'm going through, I keep coming back in my mind to the opening couple of verses, where it says, now when he saw the crowds, talking about Jesus, when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them, saying, and what's interesting is, the way it comes off there, and I'm pretty sure this is correct, he saw the crowds, so he taught his disciples. Think about the implications of that. Jesus' plan, and we see this so well laid out in Robert Coleman's The Master Plan of Evangelism, Jesus' plan was not that he was going to reach everybody, that he was going to teach everybody, preach to everybody, that he was going to heal everybody. His master plan was that he was going to reproduce himself, instill his values into his disciples, who would then be salt and light in the world and represent him and be the agents of the gospel and the coming of the kingdom. The implications of this for disciple making is that even in something like the Sermon on the Mount, it's just interesting to me that even something like that, we have this disciple-making framework right in our faces, where the answer to the crowds, the answer to the needs of the masses is not, one person or even one big church or one big initiative. The answer is multiplication of disciples. That when there's a great need, the way to respond to that need is through multiplying disciples who make disciples, and that is the way it spreads. And that's why Jesus, very early on in the Sermon on the Mount, starts talking about salt and light and how that is who the disciples are. And that is really a picture of how disciple making happens, where there's this permeation, where there's this revelation, where we go into places where there are no other disciples perhaps, and we represent Jesus and we speak for him. And we pass on the life that he has passed on to us. And so what this thinking and the opening verses of the Sermon on the Mount have done for me, it's made me very cautious of looking for the silver bullet, of looking for the program or the idea or the, the great sermon or the methodology, some new idea that's going to solve the problem, that's going to actually, do the job that maybe isn't being done too well. The answer to the need of the crowd, the answer to the need of the masses is Jesus, of course, but Jesus through his disciples. Jesus trained his disciples and told them to go make more disciples. The Apostle Paul said to Timothy, the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. Pass it on relationally, pass it on that way, multiply it out. So I think it's really important, in this era where there's so much change and so much turmoil, and we think that we need to do something completely new or something completely different. And yes, we may well probably need to change our tactics. Because what we were doing pre-COVID, pre-2020 wasn't working that well anyway. It had to change anyway. But we need to change our tactics. But the strategy is the same. The strategy is to make disciples who make disciples, to be salt and to be light, to see a great need, and rather than trying to somehow meet all of those individual needs, you see a great need, you gather together some people and equip them to help meet that need, and equip them to equip others to help meet that need. That's the model of Jesus. It's not about superstars. He's the superstar. It's not about superstars. It's about bringing the life of Christ and the presence of Christ. I think that's why there seems to be so much favor around things like neighborhood missional groups. I think that's also perhaps why there's favor around things like Alpha that really look a lot more like what Jesus was doing here than some of our big splashy events. Because the large mass media, mass crowd way of reaching people is typically not multiplication. At best, it's addition, where I may speak to 1,000 people and some of them respond to me and hopefully responding to Jesus in some way, but I've added some, but I haven't multiplied. Multiplication happens in a more close proximity, a more intimate kind of relationship. It's, Jesus saw the crowds, called his disciples. We don't know, how many that's referring to. Was it just the 12? At that point, the 12 weren't pinned down yet. It's probably a little more than 12, but it was those who were clearly identified with him. He saw the need, so he brought this group together to teach them a different way of thinking about life and thinking about the world and thinking about culture, and to instill it in them as a way of changing their thinking and equipping them to be salt and light. So I want you to think about, what is the great need that's in your face? Maybe it's in your neighborhood. Maybe it's in your home. Maybe it's in your community. Maybe it's in your country. Maybe it's in your workplace, your school. What's the great need? The thing that God has said, I want you to do something about this. And that need can seem overwhelming when you think, how do I fix this? How do I address this? Well, it can seem overwhelming if you think it's up to you. But if you understand the pattern of Jesus and saying, the way you meet the great need, the way you meet the need of the masses is through gathering together a few and instilling in them the vision and the tools and the strategy, and then releasing them to go and do the same. That is the way it happens. And I know we love the big splash. We love the instant results. It's much more gratifying, but over a very short period of time, multiplication blows away addition. And multiplication starts with just two other people, and passing it on and passing it on and passing it on. To talk about disciple making biblically, to talk about making disciples who make disciples, is inherently to talk about multiplication, to talk about a transmission of life, to talk about something that is not just about knowledge. It's about knowledge, it's about equipping, it is about just a heart passion that is passed on. Now, if you excuse me, there's a whole raft of raspberries here. All those bushes you see along the right there, those are all raspberry bushes, and they're ripe, and here I am, so it's time to do some reflection while picking raspberries.